might have some friends who are musicians, but have you ever wondered what goes on in their weeks? I met up with my friend Cameron. He's a guitar player in Knoxville, Tennessee. Originally from Memphis, he started playing gigs before he could drive a car. We met back in 2012, and we've been playing in bands together ever since. But he is a full-time working musician. I am not. So there's so much more that goes into his weeks when it comes to music, more than I even realized. And he's one of my best friends. I've known him for 12 years. So we look at, practicing, teaching, studio work, getting gigs, rehearsals, hiring musicians, the types of players that he wants to be around, becoming more well-rounded as a player by diving into different genres that might be unfamiliar to you. There's just so much in this conversation. It was a lot of fun hanging out with him. I have a separate video with Cameron where he shows me his home studio setup and all of his gear. So we do a guitar rig rundown. So make sure you check that one out too. What day of the week for you is kind of the start of your week in the life of a working musician? Day one starts on what day?
So Monday, usually when everybody else is starting their week, that's when I try to take a day off. Because I've usually worked through the weekend. I've had a church gig Sunday. I'm tired. So I take Monday off. Usually I start around Tuesday. I try to get my lessons in then. Any remote session work. Tuesday, I prepare a lot for the week. Now this Tuesday, I had a gig in Chattanooga, so it's a pretty full work day for me. And then pretty much Tuesday through Sunday nowadays if I'm...
Yeah, one day off.
Yeah, one day off.
So every week you could have a gig almost every day, if not every day.
Yeah.
You have church once or twice a week. You have a lesson or two, or sometimes more than that, sprinkled in throughout the week. You have session work, sometimes in a studio or sometimes remote, so you can do it here.
Yeah.
And then you're fitting in practicing during the daytime in between all that.
Yeah.
And then you're also fitting in rehearsing songs for gigs, learning new music. And then you're also doing your own creative projects. So writing your own music and trying to schedule time for, I guess another part of that would be you're also scheduling out your weeks in advance.
Yeah.
So practice, rehearsals, scheduling, lessons, session work, gigs. What am I missing?
We covered teaching.
Teaching, yeah.
Teaching, lessons.
Right.
I'm doing a jazz workshop every Saturday with the Knoxville Jazz Symphony Orchestra is putting that on. So I prepare a good bit for that too. I think what's important we should note is for any musician or artist, you need to kind of balance this kind of life so that you can have some kind of creative energy output. So it's not all complete work, and because you can get pretty burnt out pretty quick.
Did it take you several years to find that balance, or is that something you learned pretty quickly?
Yeah, well, I think initially I was just so excited to do anything involved with music early on. So I wasn't too concerned with getting burnt out or saying no to some things. I think any musician wants to get to a point where they can say no to stuff they don't want to. And you can't do that if you need the money. if you're concerned about how much exposure you're getting in your scene. But once you get to that point, that freedom, can be very rewarding because you can kind of allocate your time to things you want to do rather than just work the whole time. Because I think we all want to, we do this because we're creative people. We want to, create art in some sort of way. And if I'm constantly working for others and just working on their vision, then the burnout really comes into play quicker.
Have you experienced that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we could talk about this week, but
let's come back to that. So tell me, let's just go. So we made the list. I want you to talk a little bit about each component. So let's start with practicing. Let's talk about how you used to practice and how maybe at the start of when you first decided, I'm going to do music full time, I'm committing to this, 2016.
Yeah.
What was your practice like then? What was your practice like 4 years later, kind of at the midway point for you? And then what does your practice look like today?
So like when I first started, well, I guess I should go back and say I started from a young age. I learned a lot of theory and how to read music and play in orchestras. I played cello, I played upright bass and jazz bands, and took lessons and got a lot of teaching through universities and that kind of thing. So by the time I started doing this full time, in the back of my mind, something was saying, "Oh, you're good. You don't need to practice as much anymore.
Yeah.
You just need to kind of prepare for gigs." And
Yeah.
I kind of I was tallying up practicing as just me with a guitar, or me, working on
Anytime you
music.
sat down to play and learn a song or rehearse for a gig, you called that practice.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's good. You want to be around music as much as possible, or whatever your trade is, as much as possible. But practicing really should be highlighting what you should get better at, and scheduling time apart from just preparing for something, right?
Can you name an example of something that maybe you're working on right now to get better at specifically when it comes to practicing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get better at just like time feel through more complex like jazz standards and that kind of thing like that, which I will play along to recordings, and kind of act like I'm in the band as opposed to just going through the music and being like, okay, I know the song, I know the heads and stuff like that. Or I will, like a couple weeks ago, it was part of my preparation for the workshop, but I was talking about the minor melodic scale and the modes and when to use those chords and also those that scale when playing over a standard or whatever or any opportunity. So that whole week I've got some YouTube videos saved. I've got some stuff in my practice book kind of highlighted, and I know whatever on Wednesday morning for 2 hours I'm gonna make sure I go over this as much as possible, And whether it's I tell my students there's two forms of practice. There's kind of like the mindless, just getting your coordination down, getting your brain to work with your fingers well. You can do this while I like to watch basketball while I'm practicing scales or something. There's not a lot of thought that goes into that, but it's super necessary. If you don't have chops, you're not going to be able to play what you hear. But to be able to play what you hear, you have to train your ear. And a lot of that is just kind of studying, kind of making sure you know what's going on in a certain song or an application of chords.
But so much of that ear training too just comes with like hundreds of hours of improvising in gig settings and
yeah,
right?
for sure. There's a lot of experience that's associated with that.
Okay, so you years ago viewed practice as like anytime you picked up the guitar.
Yeah.
When did that change for you, and practice became more intentional and specific to certain things that you needed to improve?
Well, I think I was honest with myself, with what I wanted to sound like and how comfortable I wanted to be in any particular setting as a musician. And then through that honesty, saying, okay, I sound this way, or I'm able to play at this caliber. How am I going to get to the next level? You know, after years of not practicing appropriately, in my opinion, I finally, and this is through, hearing interviews of the greats and their practice schedule, hearing what, Charlie Parker did, what George Benson did to become great.
I remember at one point you told me that you took a rest on studying guitar players and you switched to horn players and keys players.
Right. Just
Yeah.
to get a different perspective.
Yeah. But applying that to the guitar.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's all music. It's
Yeah.
if I'm just learning guitar stuff, I don't necessarily just want to sound like a guitar player.
Is there anything else you want to cover when it comes to practice?
I mean, I think you should find a way for it to be. I mean, it doesn't always have to be fun, but I really enjoy practicing now. I think we all do. I mean, I enjoy learning new things and getting better at. I mean, it's my occupation. It's my job. I have to continue getting better. None of us want to become stagnant.
Do you find that certain parts of a song or will kind of trigger something in your mind to go, oh, I need to work on this specific thing?
Oh yeah, completely.
Happens every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just. I used to think it was just part of it. Like, okay, this section, I don't know what's going on, and that's okay. The keyboardist can handle these changes or whatever. But yeah, that doesn't feel good. And that's part of just being honest. Being like, I don't know, I don't know what's going on here. Let me hit the woodshed and really dive into this and see what's going on.
So practicing is, you're your own teacher. Did becoming a better practicer, becoming better at practice, did that help your teaching?
Yeah, for sure. Because so much of teaching, I mean, usually you have somebody's attention for about an hour, 15 minutes before it's almost too much information. You can't just, shove 8 hours of lecturing somebody and expect them to retain all that.
Right.
It's more like this is some information. Okay, here's how you apply it. Let's talk about how you're going to practice this, at home. And I really try to highlight that, okay, this exercise, whatever I'm telling you to do, this is to get your fingers able to perform and to do what your mind is telling it to do. And then this right here, you should study this and try to hear it, and it's more about listening and not so much just sitting and playing and doing something over and over and over again until it's perfect.
Your students now are like kind of all age groups or what?
Yeah, I used to primarily teach, I mean, actually I taught at a studio for a while, so it was, 7 years old to adults. So it was all sorts of stuff, which is for some people. It's fun to watch.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's fun to watch. It can be fun to watch somebody grow from not knowing a thing about music, not knowing what a quarter note is, to being able to, learn a song on their own and eventually perform and that kind of thing.
And then you're attending a performance and you're watching your student.
Yeah, that's great. And then there's what I like now is, kind of teenagers and seeing myself in them and having these skills and this natural ability, and then being like, okay, if you want to do this for the rest of your life and continue to get better potentially do this for a living. Here's what you need to do, and here's how to be better than I am. You know.
Let's talk about session work. I know sometimes you're in a studio, and then sometimes you can do stuff here. So, has that become something that is that more common now on your schedule than it used to be?
Yeah. There's an ebb and flow to it. I get a lot of work out of a studio that a buddy of mine is the head engineer and manager of the studio. So he sends me a lot of work remotely. I also go down there. I was there last night for a little bit. And just doing sessions. And that really highlights what you're able to do quickly. Because I go in for a session, sometimes I don't even know the genre really what I'm walking into. Sometimes I get the music before and I get to prepare. But it's anything from hip hop to Christian contemporary music to country to all these different styles. So if you're not able to do something and do it quickly and do it, do it right for the client, you're not going to get the call back. So there's a lot of pressure in that. There's a lot of certain skills that only apply to a studio setting. And then doing at home, you have to kind of learn to engineer yourself and get good tones with the mics that you have available, or with the gear and the interface that you have, and also being timely about that and being honest with how much time it's going to take you, and then kind of charging appropriately for that.
There's, I guess, two different types of studio experience, right? You're hired on to play a few parts on a record, or then your own bands, right? Like when you've made your own albums with a couple bands you've been playing with for years, that's a totally different experience, right?
Yeah. That's what 100% creative, and that's a ton of fun. Like we all want to do that. Yeah. We all want to. I mean, let me get this straight. I would love to, have a bunch of money provided by a record label to just sit in the studio for a couple months and hire, my favorite musicians and the best session players available to create what I'm hearing in my head.
That might be your long-term goal.
Sure, I think that. I don't know many people that don't want to just do that.
Yeah.
For a while, but then there's also, taking whether it's a band I'm in or a certain idea or tunes that I have, and kind of working with your own budget and the band's budget and the certain amount of time you have allocated in the studio, and trying to make the most happen with that time. I learned quickly too that I can do a lot of guitar parts here. So I was in Nashville a couple weeks ago, and I knew I only had so much time with the keyboard player and the bass player. They were hired on that day. This was for a band that I'm in. So let's get as much tracked as we can as possible with y'all's parts. Let's get it ironed out. Any ideas we have, get drums and bass and all rhythm section stuff ironed out, and then I can go home and kind of use my time more wisely with the guitar work and that kind of thing. Because in a studio, usually you're paying for the microphones, you're paying for the preamps, you're basically renting the incredible gear that they hopefully have available to you, and the engineer, and just the process of that. But a lot of that in the last few years, I've learned I can make a lot of decent sounds right here.
Right here, yeah. But that's something that took you years to, slowly invest in gear. This was something that took a lot of time, right?
Yeah. And that's...
Did you know early on that you wanted to have your own remote session set up here? Or is that something that several years in you realized, oh, this is an option now? Like maybe you weren't aware of it when you started.
Yeah, it wasn't until I didn't get my DAW, my digital audio workstation, until 2018, I guess. It was a few years into doing this. And it was after a producer buddy of mine really told me, hey, you need to do this. I need I need your work on my tracks, and I'm sick of you having to drive to Nashville or, a studio nearby to do this. Like, this is what you got to do. And I fell in love with it at first. I remember I got it, and then I was watching Law and Order at the time, and I just wanted to like learn my interface and learn how to record on my own. And so I tracked
like the intro theme
the
song?
intro, dum, 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 dum,
Yeah.
and that was the first song I tracked on my own, just to teach me. And I was like, oh man, this is a blast.
Yeah.
However, if we're talking about how to allocate time, like, I mean, anybody that's a producer out there or an engineer knows that you can spend a ton of time in front of your, of your recording setup, whether it's mixing or mastering, you get kind of lost in that. So,
Like in a bad way, too much time.
yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. I don't want to say a bad way, because you learn a lot in doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't consider myself a complete engineer. I'm not, I produce music, but I don't completely record and mix here at home. So it's like I'd rather spend my time doing other things, whether it's practicing or, actually recording parts. Because there's engineers out there for that. But it's something I want to get better at as well.
Okay, let's talk about gigs. Different
Gigs.
types. So many different types.
Yeah.
So you've been playing in church for years. Different types of churches. That's pretty consistent, stable income.
Yeah.
It's a great place to practice and improve.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something to be said about having a consistent gig, as in weekly for me, twice a week, every week. I play like a gospel church, so the music can be pretty challenging and something I didn't necessarily grow up doing. So I'm learning new music, I'm performing weekly, I'm helping kind of direct the band and working with the choir and stuff like that. So yeah, that can be a fun process because it's so consistent. You can grow and see that growth quickly.
And you're playing with, sometimes you're playing with different musicians, a bunch of different musicians.
Yeah.
Kind of a revolving door of players.
Right.
And then you meet these musicians and then you hire them for other gigs.
Of course, yeah.
Just the
especially-
network expands
Yeah,
constantly.
especially in the South. Anybody that came out of here, I mean, and those musicians that are on the biggest tours in the world right now, it seems like they all came out of church.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that, and
Yeah.
there's a reason for that, especially in the gospel scene right now. I mean, you see these giant bands. Justin Bieber's band, that is a gospel band.
Yeah.
that is like
The Weeknd.
100%. Yeah, The Weeknd. All these giant pop artists, like, and it's just not just today in 2024. This has been a thing for forever.
Sure.
Popular music. Of course, Ray Charles and Al Green. These are gospel musicians that just transitioned into the pop world. So yeah, that's one type.
Okay, then let's talk about gigs with bands that have been your projects, your personal project bands.
Yeah, so when I first knew that I was going to do this full time, I started like a trio, really just gigging in mind, just knowing that like I can have something that is for hire, for different, whether it's for background jazz gigs or more dancey occasions, whether it's playing at a bar, whether we feature singers. So I created a group that was also really fun to play and that I could do consistently. And it's been almost a decade of playing with that same kind of band or idea.
Yeah.
And we record and have original music, but it's really like a trio that I can go out and get, get some practice playing songs I love and hire musicians that I love to play with, you being one of them.
This trio was born out of the band that we started 2013, 14,
Yeah.
and where that was kind of more of a solid group of players. And then the trio kind of came out of that, and then it became a open door for so many different drummers, keys players.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always just a trio, right? Like sometimes you might decide, oh, I want to have a dedicated bass player for this gig. I want to have a horn player for this gig. So the trio is kind of the core of it, but it really is a mix of all sorts of different players in town.
Exactly. So it's an excuse for me to play with new people all the time. And I try to make it as professional as possible. At the same time, I try to book gigs that are worth it. And after 10 years of doing it, I don't really have to spend too much time booking. They kind of just fall in my lap with different, whether it's a brewery or whether it's a wedding or something like that. It's a great way to fill up the calendar.
Yeah.
Especially in January and February when I'm not doing a whole lot of traveling or touring. There's not a ton of gigs out there, but I make sure the calendar is kind of full.
Yeah.
Keeps
And
it
you would
consistent.
call that more of like, that is a local gig that you use to test out new songs you want to cover, play some original music, play around town, just kind of fill up the calendar. And then the second side of that, playing with dedicated bands, would be, you've had a band for the last 6, 7, 8 years that was more one singular group of players that was recording albums and doing tours outside of one city, playing around the South primarily, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole other project.
Yeah, and those really, I think what separates that is really just the vision you have for a group. Do you want to focus on putting out singles and EPs and hopefully get on the road and play like major festivals and theaters and that kind of thing? And that you have to invest a lot of time and effort, and it's not just so much, putting dates on the calendar. There's like there's a goal in mind with that.
Yeah, sure.
Which,
being very cautious to plan out, okay, this is when we're going to play this song for the first time live. This is when we're going to release this EP with these 3 songs on it.
Yeah, you're dealing with original music, and you're dealing with, sometimes 4 or 5 creative people that all have an input in the project that they deem themselves associated with. And myself included, could be a lot of opinions with that. So it's a lot to juggle. But the rewards for that, we all know, like playing in a band, I mean, the sky's the limit. You can really find a sound and a certain energy that you can bring to a show or an album or whatever, and that can be, heard by the whole world at this point. So.
Music videos are fun, right?
Yeah, music, all that stuff. It's a blast playing in bands.
Yeah. Let's go back and let's talk about how your mindset has changed and how you approach your work. When you first started, maybe at the midway point, and now, what are some major changes that you made? Some major shifts mentally.
For me, it's all about time. Now, maybe it's just as you get older,
You mean time feel like when you're playing?
No. It's just how am I spending my time? I realized after I was working at that studio teaching that I thought it was like, okay, I'm involved with music, I'm teaching, I'm making money through music, check, I'm good. But I quickly realized that it was taking up too much time. I wasn't getting paid enough for that to be worth it for me. I could do lessons here at my own studio space and make more money doing that and have more time for myself. So I think that's the biggest one. Also, I was spending too much time initially on the road. For any like touring musician, I think we know that your chops are the worst after day 5 or 6 on the road.
Why do you say that?
You're not. You might be tight as a unit. You know, the music that you're playing every night in a select city might sound better, but you know, you're spending all your time in a van or whatever, rather than practicing and that's all to say.
But it's not often that you're in a van for weeks on end. I mean, you might do like 1 week of a
1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, I've done very few. That's more than 2 weeks on the road.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about last week and I think you played 5 shows out of town, right?
Yeah. So we had like a week-long tour. I went out with a smooth jazz artist, with some just incredible musicians. It was a very well-run tour. You know, we knew what we were making up front and on the back end. Anything after that, you know, we had per diems and hotels in every city, and that's the only way I travel now. So I gotta have my. That's probably if we're talking about differences between now and before. Before, I mean, when I was 22 years old, I can sleep on the floor.
Yeah.
Or sleep in a van
5
or whatever.
dudes crammed in a van, crashing on the floor in somebody's friend's house.
Some people can do that their whole life. I can't. I just had to. I had to say straight up.
Yeah.
Like I'm done with doing that. It's not worth it to me. If the money is not there, therefore the bed isn't there for me. But yeah, last week was great. So yeah, that was a blast. It's exhausting still, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. When you come back from a run like that, how do you feel? Do you feel like you've learned some things you need to practice now? You're inspired to work on some creative projects?
Yeah, all of the above. I was really inspired by the players I was playing with. I was the youngest on that tour by 20 years, so 20 years less experience than everybody, so I was very humbled. And I came back ready to get better and to do it again and put myself in a position where I'll be selected for something like that again. Mm-hmm. I wish I had more time off to to get back to work, but I, as you know, went right back out on the road.
Yeah, well, it never stops for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about maybe a little bit of advice for anybody who's in the thick of it, you know, working as a full-time working musician, or if they're maybe just getting started?
Yeah. Well, I want to give like a disclaimer that like this path that I've taken, I haven't done everything correctly. I'm still learning as I go. And also this is for me, a guitar player. I have my certain set of skills. I think it's unique though. I think that should be highlighted. That this is unique to me, but at the same time,
there's not a blueprint.
Yeah, there's not a blueprint. Yeah. But at the same time, I would say the advice I would have is make sure if you choose to be a working musician, make sure you're working. I hear too often like as soon as music becomes a job, I'm gonna do something else because it should never be a job. That's a good way to start working, you know, in some other field. If you want to do this for a living, you have to work and you have to put in the time every single day. It's really easy to, you know, when you don't have to have a time to wake up in the morning for 5 or 6 days in the week, you know, to get in bad habits and not, you know, kind of get down on yourself. And,
sure. You have to be a lot more disciplined because you have so much more control of your free time.
Yeah, and there's nowhere, I didn't go into, you know, an employee office or whatever and say, hey, I'm a musician. I would like to be employed by the musicians union. Please provide for me a salary and healthcare and all the benefits. And they say, okay, cool.
And the plan.
Yeah, here.
And all the steps.
Yeah, here's your boss. There's no boss here. Yeah. This is the truth with any freelancer, not just musicians. You are your own boss. So you have to be critical of where your time is spent. And be consistent, you know. I'm constantly looking at the next month and tallying up every dollar I'm gonna make and sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm satisfied with this amount. I'm gonna take a day off here or there. I'm gonna write on this day, or schedule something that's more creative for me, for my outlet, not just working as
But
a
you
musician.
prefer to kind of always have some sort of work on the books almost every day.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very rare, I guess I should say, it's very rare that you'll take a week off and say, I just want to practice this week. I don't want to have any gigs. Like that's very rare for you, right? Or even taking a week off for vacation is.
Yeah. I should probably do that more. That's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
Because all of that happens. This happened for me only 3 or 4 years ago, where I got to a place financially that I was able to like step back and really analyze my time.
Yeah, you have more flexibility and more freedom because you had kind of built up some more savings, or you had worked to a point where your gigs are paying more, or so you could be more selective, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah. So like more advice, I guess, find out what you're good at. We can't all be front men or front women, on the mic. I don't have much of a voice. So that's not in the cards for me. I'm not going to spend my time trying to do that. If you're a drummer, if you're a bass player, work on that. Work on what you're good at, and market yourself as that.
Are you referencing like specific styles of play?
Yeah, specific styles as well.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Hey, I like playing country guitar. I'm good at it. That's not personally, but so I'm gonna go to Nashville and get my name in.
Yeah.
Everywhere I can.
You're saying that it's okay to kind of have your niche and stay within that.
Totally.
But then other players choose to be more well-rounded. Like I know you have an experience with country and jazz, and your passion is like more pop music, right?
Yeah, R&B.
R&B.
Yeah.
Talk about the different styles and how you approached, like you were very intentional about, if I'm going to play country, I need to learn how to play country.
Yeah.
Not, half-ass it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like if you're diving into something that you're not too familiar with, you should study up on it. You should, number
What
one,
did you do?
Start listening. I didn't grow up with country music, so I had to listen to a lot of stuff. I'm in East Tennessee now, so I've learned a good bit and picked up a lot along the way. But if you're gonna focus on jazz, you should probably make sure you've listened to Kind of Blue and all these historical recordings and stuff like that before you even step into it. Immerse yourself in whatever you're doing, or else you're just gonna kind of be faking it.
So let's compare that to let's say playing a country gig is new for you. There's two approaches, right? There's just learn the songs for the one gig. It's like that might turn out pretty well. The second approach is, like you said, immerse yourself in the music, listen to all sorts of different records, different styles of country, practice not only the songs for that one gig or for those handful of gigs, but practice just kind of immersing yourself and getting really good in country in general. And then you apply that to the specific songs for those specific gigs.
Yeah, because especially in music, there's trends in each genre. I remember when I first started playing a lot of R&B and gospel music. I asked my buddy, I was like, how do you get used to this kind of stuff? I'm not really hearing the changes as well as I do with other genres that I'm used to. And he said, just keep listening. It's all the same. And sure enough, I built up my repertoire of tunes, and now I can hear what's going to come next a lot quicker. And a lot of that is just listening. Yeah, we were talking about this the other day. It's what you grew up listening to is so ingrained in your brain. If you were to play that or try to play that kind of music, it'd be so much easier than me playing, polka or something I'm completely foreign to.
To go back to practice, Tell me about scheduling and planning out your practices in advance rather than just practicing kind of in the moment when you feel like it, because that was a huge shift for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I talk about honesty a lot in practice because what's not honest is, say I'm playing a gig and I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel good playing. I wasn't happy with what I played. I listen back to the recording, like, that could have been a lot better. But somebody at the gig came up to me and said, you're the best guitar player in town. That was incredible. Well, that's not honesty. What am I going to take this guy's word for it? Even though I know deep down and I know more about music than this guy probably does. I'm going to be honest with myself and say, okay, I'm uncomfortable with these aspects of my playing and what I understand, and maybe I need to just hit the woodshed and start practicing and work on my chops or whatever. That's the honesty I'm talking about. And then after that, after you highlight what you're truthfully not good at, then you can design kind of what you need to practice. And not just what's fun. I think when I was a teenager and practicing, I would make loops of my favorite jams, and then just play over that. And it was fun. I sound good on a 145, and but that's not all music. That's not, if you're a working musician, you're going to be put in situations where you need to be able to hear what's going on and be able to play over that, and give the song justice.
Tell me about working in different cities, not just the city you live in, and why that's important.
So working in different scenes, I would say, is important because you can get really frustrated in your own town or your own scene, because there's definitely a certain vibe of what's going on, and I think obviously there's different players in these towns. There's talented people out there in a lot of places, especially where we're at in Tennessee. We're all competing for what's the best city, but maybe behind Nashville. But, I get out of it, I see what maybe one city is doing right and then what they're doing wrong in their scene, and whether that's in the original music that's coming out of it, whether it's in the venues and what they're offering.
Because there's inconsistencies across different markets.
Yeah, and whether that's like session rates or gig rates, or just the general culture of musicianship in a city.
Will you really go deeper into that? Tell me about that.
I think, well, like here, I can use like Knoxville as an example. You have a really good music school here at the University of Tennessee, and so a lot of guys come out of that system hungry, and also they know how to show up and be professional and dress the part, show up on time. These little things that matter so freaking much. I can't emphasize that enough. Mm-hmm. You go somewhere else where like the caliber of playing is just the same. Amazing players. But those little things don't matter, so there can be disorganization in a lot of those kind of scenes. And it doesn't matter how big the city is. Sometimes this is in larger cities, than what we're used to. But yeah, it's more the culture of what's expected.
Some places are a bit more professional than others.
Yeah, and some really encourage, unique, creative, original music. And some places, hey, they'd rather hear cover songs at shows. It's not as much of a community backing, the artistic experience. And that can be, usually it's pretty specific to genres,
But you would say that it's made you a better player by putting yourself in those different markets. Because if you were in one place where, cover bands are more expected and original music isn't as encouraged, that might cause a bit of burnout.
For sure.
So it's like you've been able to kind of put yourself here and here and here and here. Mm-hmm. And Do you think that's made you better? I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been going down to a buddy of mine lives in Baton Rouge, but he works in New Orleans as a musician. And when I go down there, I mean, I know there's going to be a lot of jazz being played. Of course, that's in the culture. If I go to Nashville, there's going to be a ton of country being played. So it's really beneficial to know all those types of genres. I think anywhere. I mean, it's a certain type of person that's going to succeed anywhere, though. It's not. You can't really just depend on your scene to bring you up. Once again, no one's working for you to put you. I mean, at least not for me. No one's making sure I'm showing up on time and knowing my stuff. No one really cares. They're just not going to call me back. I think you should with any. Once again, this is just not. For musicians, just any freelancers, it's the little things. I don't think we've talked about that. It's like, can you be responsive to emails, to messages? Can you show up on time? Can you show up to a gig and dress the part? That is huge. I know guys that haven't got called back because they didn't wear what was.
Wow.
What they're supposed to wear. That's just how it works.
Like for a jazz gig, maybe a more formal setting, or for a wedding or something like that.
Of course, yeah. There's just certain gigs call for certain attire, and if you show up late to a gig, I mean, there's nothing unless you're just incredible and your talent can back you 1,000%. Usually, that's going to lead to you not getting work, right? It's not just like, I don't care as much about this gig or this session or whatever. You got to think what's going to happen in the future and what's going to come of that. I've gotten a lot of gigs, not based on the little talent that I have. It's more because I show up prepared. If I have my charts, I've thought about what's going on in advance. I'm there an hour early, that kind of thing. That seems so obvious, but in this industry, we're artists, so we're late. We're kind of airheaded a lot of times, and that's going to happen from time to time. But
there's a balance between the professionalism it takes to get the call back, and then also the creative artist inside of you.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to find that middle ground.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I used to think it was really cool to, say I was hired for something where I feel like I am the best showing up. I have the highest quality of musicianship on the gig, on the session. So I'd be like, okay, I can be late to this. I can not take this so seriously, and that's just, I mean, it's shooting yourself in the foot, because, you're not going to be as prepared. It doesn't look good, it's like you kind of have to get, you have to get yourself motivated, even though, it might not make or break your career. It's still your time. It's still your work. You have to get pumped up for what you're doing. Because it sucks being. I'm involved with so many different people throughout the week that I work with, and it really blows being with people that don't want to be there, even if they're super talented and they fit the part perfectly. If they don't want to be there, and I can see, I don't want to work with them. So I don't want to give off that vibe. But early on, I thought I did. I thought I wanted to be the coolest one in the room that didn't really need, the exposure, the experience that whatever work I was doing had to offer.
We covered very briefly about how you played in the orchestra and played cello, but talk about Memphis and when you were gigging at 13, 14.
Yeah.
Talk about the Tone Junkies.
Yeah. So I grew up in a community in Memphis that was just heavily influenced by music. I mean, I lived in a cove, and just in my cove alone, I mean, we had like 4 guitar players. And just up the street, my best friend lived. He was another guitar player. And behind me was an incredible drummer. You know, it wasn't just, you know, of course we played Nirvana when we were 11 years old and wanted to be in rock groups, but it quickly moved because of the influence of Memphis with jazz and gospel and blues. We were influenced by that just with the local scene and the legends around us that were teaching the lessons and involved in our schools, you know, music programs there. So we quickly started playing jazz and funk and you know, music that most 12-year-olds in the early 2000s didn't really care about.
And then you're getting gigs,
And
playing restaurants and bars when
yeah,
you're
yeah, and I was lucky. I got
barely in high school.
Yeah, and I was one of the few that had like early on training in music, like in a symphony. I played cello and I had training in jazz in 4th grade and on bass and stuff. So I started accumulating that knowledge pretty early on. And then, yeah, I don't know how it initially happened, but I mean, starting the end of 8th grade, I was in a band called Chocolate Milk Groove Team. And we started playing we had a local spot at a barbecue place, of course, in Memphis, and then a sushi restaurant. We played there like every week. So I had like 2 gigs, like pretty consistently. Just
How old were you then?
I mean, I was young. I couldn't drive yet.
Yeah.
I think I was in high school
Okay.
by that point.
14, 15 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And playing with players that were better, or that were older than me. I mean, they were 17 rather than 14 or 15. But I learned a whole lot from them. And that maybe was kind of unique to Memphis and having that much influence like that from a young age.
I think it's definitely unique. I mean, gigging at 14. That's pretty awesome.
But I still it was never explained to me how to do this, you know, for the rest of my life, to make a living doing it. I wasn't convinced.
Wait, you went to college and got a degree and
and something else completely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even then, I wasn't. You know, people tell you, you know, study music, study hard, practice as much as you can. But when you're 18, just know, you know, it's going to be a long, hard road if you choose to be an artist. And it is, but it's totally doable. I think that's why you're talking to me right now, because.
And it's fun, and it's the challenges are rewarding for you, and you've learned so much about yourself, and you grow, you know, relatively quickly. Like, I don't know. I think, you know, you in 2016 versus you now. I mean, you had a great mindset at the time probably, but you approach your work differently now in a much better way, and
and
then it pays off. I mean,
I think I was so excited for the I Told You So's. You know, it was like I did it quickly. I was like, within a month of being like, I'm a full-time musician, I could pay my bills. And so I was just going, whether it was my parents or whatever, my friends that were in grad school or, you know, already working in the office. I was like, I told you so, I can do it, I can make money. Bam, I did it, I made it. And, you know, obviously my expectations and goals have changed since then. But you can make it happen. You might have to, whether you choose to have a family early on or whatever, you might have to make some changes, or, you know, there's not always this like, okay, if you want to be a musician, you can do this, but you've got to go work at O'Charlie's, you know, during the week.
There's options to, if you're able to fill up your calendar enough, you don't really have to have that side job.
Yeah.
Because for you, teaching was really that consistent job.
I needed those 3 or 4 days a week where I was teaching a lot. Thankfully now I don't have to rely on that.
Do you look back on these last 8 years and think of a big mistake you made that, I don't know, is there anything that stands out like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to deal with, I get asked to do a lot of things. Like, I feel like every day somebody's asking me to do it. And it's usually, it's paid, right? You know, I don't do anything for, I try not to do anything for free. But I think you should be very straight up in how much time it's going to require from you, and whether you really care about the final product of what you're doing. And also, if you're the right person for the job. That's huge. I'm at a point where I can put my pride aside sometimes and be like, hey, I appreciate the call, but for what this is going to require, I think you should call somebody else for this. And that's tough to do. I don't do that a lot, but I've been doing that more lately, because it's just, there's nothing worse than going into something that you know you're not suited for. That, you know, because this world that I'm in is pretty broad in music. There's so many different applications and jobs that you can do and find yourself doing.
Yeah, but even then, like, occasionally you might seek a gig playing bass, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like, you 99% of your gigs you're playing a guitar, but sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm gonna play bass. I mean, I think you asked me to fill in on drums one time, which I almost did.
No, I asked you to play bass.
No, those drums at that church.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
And I was pumped because I think I could have made it work.
Yeah, with that church, yeah,
Yeah,
you would have been fine.
But yeah, and I think going into this too, I get a lot of these questions early on from people that are like in high school, like how do I make this work as a career, or people right out of college or whatever. And a lot of it is, dude, you have to be one of the best at what you do in your scene, in your work environment.
Is it possible to get to a place where you can become complacent and like too comfortable?
Yeah, and I think it's a certain personality type we're talking about, and I don't know if maybe they fit well in this industry, but like I'm really competitive. I know who's better than me, you know, in this town and in this state or whatever, and I'm going out to see them gig, and I'm telling them like, hey, you know, great playing, man, and then I'm going home and trying to play their licks, you know, because I'm competitive and I want to be better, and I know I might not have as much natural ability as them, and I might have to work a little harder.
Yeah.
I think we all want to be like this kind of given prodigy, and you know, just people, you know, all the work just come to us. That'd be great, but that's not my path. I have to work pretty hard and practice a lot. Yeah, and and if you just want to play acoustic guitar, and if you want to be a singer-songwriter, you know, guaranteed if you do it 8 hours a day for a few years, 8 true hours a day of practicing, of writing, you will make it happen. I see it happen all the time. But you also see people that start to do that and they get 3 gigs a week paying $200 each, and they're like, okay, this is cool, but I'm burnt out. I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I don't feel like I'm not growing, I'm not getting better. Because yeah, you're working as a musician, but like, you didn't get into this work just to do that. That's just part of the work. That's a small part. It's this gigging, this like making money doing it, you know. So much of it is just being creative, getting better at what I do, at what I'm potentially going to be hired for.
Tell me about developing the mindset that it's okay to put in the hours for something that might not pay the best. You know, like, I think you mentioned something about that, right?
Yeah, because like you have to recognize the industry that you're in, and if you just say like, man, I worked at Music Incorporated here for 40 hours this week, but I didn't make $20 an hour or whatever, you know. Sure, that's easy to compute and go get you a job working somewhere else. There's plenty of jobs that'll pay you per hour, a salary, whatever. But there's no ceiling here, you know. There's days where I can make what other people make in a week or a month, right? There's royalties that I can be given for the rest of my life through the work that I put in right here. Like you have to be real with what is the potential and how you get there. And it's hard to stomach sometimes. But like I love the process. I love practice. I love playing music. So it's not I don't really just look at it like even if it's a gig, if it's like if I know it's going to take like 10 hours to prepare for this gig that's not paying me 10 hours worth of time. If I don't want to play the gig, if I'm not the right person for it, fine. But if I want to grow from that music I'm learning, and I think it's going to be a benefit to me later on, whether to get hired for something like that or to just provide me with skills for writing or just to grow, then I'm going to take that. I'm gonna just bank those hours in, you know, as practice, as for me.
Was there anything is there anything that's happened over the last few years that was unexpected? Maybe some roadblocks, you know, or positive things that an unexpected benefit of getting to this point in your career?
Reaching a goal that you previously had in mind and then getting there and then realizing that it's not exactly what you had in mind.
You mean the payoff wasn't as good, or
Yeah,
and so then your goals have actually shifted and changed?
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, like I had a goal to like headline a local theater in town. You know, I've played theaters before, whatever, but I wanted to play this one theater. And it coming up to that date, I realized it's not what I wanted at all, and it wasn't good for me, and it wasn't good for the group I was in. It would actually, no part of it was worth it, you know. So I kind of had to, like, it was great. It was great being a part of that, but it didn't. I kind of had to like reorganize that goal of mine, that like specifically the performance goal of mine. Because yeah, it's about because these little glimpses in a musician's career, these shows, these tours, these sessions, they're really quick. They happen. They start and they end within a few hours. Mm-hmm. You know, it's cliche, but it's about what you're doing all along the way. You know, it's about your growth, your consistent growth, and your path, and it just so happens that every now and then you get to, you know, be cheered on by hundreds or thousands of people.
Yeah.
And that feels amazing. But if that's your goal, or that for me personally, that just to do that alone, and that's a very broad goal I think I had, and now it's a little more specific.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're describing so many hours of kind of behind the scenes, putting in the work, and then boom, a gig you were really excited about that you planned months ago, and then more of this, more of this. Oh, here's an album release, more of this, more of this.
Yeah, because like the process along the way can be a whole lifetime of preparation if you view it like that, or you know.
Or it's like an athlete who puts in hundreds of hours in the gym, and then, you know, they have the game, and right?
Yeah. If you don't enjoy the process, if you don't love it every day, then it's not gonna be worth it. You're gonna get really frustrated.
Yeah.
And it's just, once again, it's a lot easier to go back and scrutinize what you're doing day by day when you have a lot of experience doing it and a lot of failure. And then you have, these moments of anxiety that you wonder why am I anxious right now about what I'm about to do this next week? Let's highlight this. What am I doing wrong here? Where do I feel like I'm getting taken advantage of? Which is huge. We need to talk about that. It's just like
Hold on, before you get into that, I like this. The anxiety comes from a place of not being prepared enough.
I say that. I've talked to kids or students about that. They say like I'm just I'm so anxious, I'm so nervous when I perform. Like I don't know why. And I usually tell them it's because you're not prepared, you know. And that doesn't mean don't perform. It doesn't mean you'll never get there. It just means you care about how you sound and you don't feel like you're where you at. So keep preparing it, keep doing it. You know, you'll get more comfortable at what you're doing. That's how it is for me personally when I'm anxious about a show. Usually I'm not prepared, or I don't think that there's any possible way that the group can be prepared to play a show, to make the best time at a session, like whatever it is. But then there's the anxiety of, dang it, I agreed to do this work for somebody that I've already committed to without really being honest to them about how much time it's going to take and how much that is worth to me. You know, if you can put a number or a dollar amount beside that. And then it comes to the week of, and then you're sitting there like, well, I can't cancel. I can't not do this. I can't bail, but I'm not in a position to ask for more money or prepare.
So what do you do in a
anymore.
situation like that? You just
You just learn from it.
yeah.
Yeah, you learn from it. I mean, you give it your best shot, and yeah, just don't do it in the future. And there's a lot to be said for that. If we canceled every time I didn't want to play a gig because I don't feel creatively expressive enough, then I would cancel just 95% of the gigs. You know, because that's just the way humans are. We sign up to do something, and then when it comes down to it, sometimes we just want to not do it. But it's your job. You got to show up. This is more specifically like long-term stuff, like whether it's usually it's somebody using you for your talents, your skills, and you not being compensated enough for it. That's when I'm like anxious about it and wish I would have been more transparent. Realize that if you're good at something, I mean, this is for anybody, but with musicians especially, because people view us as like wizards, like magicians, like we have some special skill that can never be obtained by anywhere else. So they're gonna use you as much as possible to get whatever, to produce their music, to make their dreams come true.
Or to play 40 covers at a wedding, right?
Yeah. Whatever it might be. So recognize that you have leverage there. If you're you should be confident in the skills that you have and what you have to offer. So recognize when somebody is seems to be taking advantage of that. Because those that are doing this at the highest level are cocky about what they have to offer, and they're going to be a position where they can say no to a lot of stuff.
Will you describe the types of musicians that you love to work with?
I love musicians that practice. I love going to a gig and be like, hey man, what you been doing? Man, just been shedding. I don't care if you've been working on these tunes. Just I've been working on myself. That's huge. We like to be cocky and be like, I don't need to practice anymore. But it's awesome to hear that like I'm not the only one that's like trying to work at this. Musicians that are on time, that's great. That's a big plus. Good attitude. I mean, I don't expect you to smile the whole time, but like, once again, we don't always just want to be where we're at, where we have to work. It's work sometimes, but you can show up. And so much of what we do, whether it's performing or just music in general, it's about how we feel. So if you're in front of an audience or just even with the musicians in the group. If you're putting off this bad juju, this bad energy, then it's gonna translate to everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's you. Obviously, good players is nice to have, but
Sometimes the timeliness, the attitude, the effort is more important than the actual skill level.
yeah, for sure. That's for anything. Was it hard work works when talent isn't working? Is that the
I don't know.
something like that?
You should
I should
quote that one.
put that.
Do you have any stories about anything at all from on the road, gigs, practicing? Any stories that really stand out that you want to share?
I think I told you a story about a drummer recently who's a really, really talented player, like one of the best in the Atlanta scene. And I was on a gig with him, and he walked out after he had learned all the music, playing with an artist. Yeah, he had learned all the music. He was prepared, but the artist was really being ticky-tacky about specifically his work on the hi-hat and what. But we only had 45 minutes to rehearse before this whole showcase. It was only one show. She wasn't being practical with the time, and he got frustrated a little bit. Didn't get mad. I knew him. I knew he was kind of like, okay, I'm doing my best. And then she turned around one time and said another ticky-tacky thing. And he said, hold on, I got just what you need. And he called up another guy. And he packed up his bags, and he went back home to Atlanta. Somebody else came, played the gig, who was not more qualified than him. And it wasn't his pride showing through. He just said, I'm worth more than this. This is ridiculous. I'm getting out of here, And I look at that, and then so many times in my life where I should have done that came up. And specifically, we're on the road. This will combine them all. We're on the road and playing in Jacksonville, Florida. Our management, our booking company had just thrown a few of these gigs here and there, and just in between cities. And this was like a club. I mean, it was completely packed to the brim. But we get to the front, and the bouncer or the manager or whatever, referred to some members in our band as like boy, and these like kind of racially, racist terms that were like not cool at all and didn't sit well with us. And it rubbed us all the wrong way, but we had in our minds we had to keep up with what the booking agency wanted. They wanted to make a certain quota. They had to pay us out what we signed a contract to get paid. I wish we would have left.
So you played the gig.
We played the gig,
right? And
it was fine. It was whatever. But it felt like we were getting taken advantage of, and we weren't respected for what we were doing, because like as artists, like when you first start working as a musician, you treat every gig like it's your last. That's what they say, And you should, but you should still hold on to some dignity there at the same time. Every gig isn't your last. You can afford, if the gig's paying $200, you're not going to be homeless because you don't make $200 on a Thursday night in Jacksonville, Florida. You can go back home and say, hey, you don't deserve to have us play there. Thanks, but no thanks.
Do you have other stories that are not about walking out of a gig?
That's like the most badass.
Yeah, tell me some fun ones, man.